Hello, and welcome to the Topography and Contours Lab video part 2. So in this video, I will actually be walking you through the lab exercises so that we're all on the same page, and it might clarify if you had trouble with getting through the exercise on your own. And I'll also make sure to highlight some important points to keep in mind when doing these sort of assignments, as well as what will be important for when and if this shows up on an exam. All right. So first, we're on the contour and profile exercise 1. So as you see at the top here, we're given a bunch of data points that show a certain elevation. So like 550 feet, 520 feet, so on and so forth. And we're told to use a contour interval of 100 feet. So what that means is for every topographic contour line, or every space in between them, represents an elevation change of 100 feet. So technically, you could do it based off of any given height you wanted, but just for sake of ease and as the standard, what we'll be doing here is making contour lines at whole hundreds of feet. So 400 feet, 500 feet, 600 feet, that sort of thing. That's just for sake of ease, and also helps for readability when, or if you ever make a map using topographic contours and someone else is looking at them, it just makes it a lot easier to read. So let me go ahead and zoom in here. Just get up to the top here. Okay. Okay. So this line across the image, A to A prime, is not actually a physical feature there. That's just the profile line, and we'll be using that to construct the profile at the bottom of the page once we're finished actually generating the contours here. So first, let's start in the top left corner here. So we have several points of data, 550, 520, 510, and then we see 480, 450, 480 again, and some 400 ones in the 400s down here. So we want to do a contour at the 500-foot line. So when you're looking at 2 points, you can just estimate if that contour line is going to fall between them, if 500 feet will fall between these 2 points. So between 520 and 480, we know that 500 is in between those two numbers and about halfway between both of those. So we'll want to start there. And once again, 520, 450, so we know it goes somewhere in here. 510, 480, so we'll be a little closer. So on and so forth. So what we can do here, just so for clarity here, I'm going to get rid of those. We know that it goes between all those points. So the contour, remember, it has to go off the page. So you can start it something like this and take it off the page, and then make sure you label it. So you can either write it on the next to the line itself, which is common on full-blown contour maps, or you can just write it off to the side. So just for sake of ease for this, since I'm doing it digitally, I'll go ahead and write it off to the side. So that's our 500-foot contour here. So continuing along, we have 400, 400 something, 400 something. Now we're getting into the 300s, and then back to the 400s and beyond. So between 470 and 350, we know 400 is somewhere in there. We also know that it should be in between these two. And once again, in between these two, and in between these two. So really, effectively what we're looking at here is making a little island of these, of a contour around, separating these 400 contour or 400 foot elevations from these 300 foot elevations. So go ahead and mark that as well. Now if you notice, we also have some 300s down here, so we need to separate these as well. So we know 470, 360, we know it'll be somewhere in between there. 470 to 380, we know it'll be somewhere around there. 460 to 380, so it's got to be in between those two. Once again, between these two, and between these two. So for this one, we'll go ahead and just connect them. And this is our 400-foot contour down here. Now there are a couple of different ways you can do this. So how I have it done is I've just sort of isolated these 300 points using two islands. Another way, which would still honor the data fully, is, let's see, if we did this a little differently here, rather than having two islands that separate these 300 points from these 400 points, what you could do is actually, rather than making it two islands, like that and that, what you can do is actually do it as a sliver going through the map. So going something like this, and then like this. And both of these, once again, would be 400-foot contours. Just for sake of visibility, I'm going to mark it on both. So this is one of those cases where it's really open up to your individual interpretation of the data. This honors both or all the data points as well as that other way of having two islands of 300 points. So it's really personal preference. If we knew more about the specific geology of the area, or if we had maybe some firsthand experience of the area, we could make a better justification for one way versus the other. But for now, either way will work here. So now we need to go on again and separate some of these. So 470, 530. So we know there's going to be a 500-foot contour in here somewhere. Once again, 470 to 520. And between these two, 460 and 550. Somewhere in there. So it's probably somewhere in here. Separate these. Now we've got enough where we can go across the whole map. And this will be our 500-foot contour on this side. So what this really means is as you're going from left to right, you're starting at a higher location up here. This starts to dip down, and then it starts to go back up. That's important to keep in mind once we're constructing that profile from A to A prime down at the bottom of the page. So just moving along. So 530 and 520, and then we have 620. So we know the 600-foot contour is going to be somewhere in here as well. 550 and 660, so somewhere in between there. 570 and 640, so somewhere in there. Then we don't see any other 500s down at the bottom over here, but we do see the 580 over here. So I think we have enough to really justify just finishing up this contour. So we'll just start at the top, the edge of the working space, and connect these spots. And there we have our 600-foot contour. Moving along, you see several 600 and some odd foot points, but then we have some 700-foot points in here. But then we see some more 600 going around the edges. So once again, we'll just go along. So between 620 and 720, we know that there's going to be that 700-foot contour in there. 660 and 720, somewhere in there. 670 and 720, somewhere in there. It also has to separate that between the 730. So 640, then 740 and 730. So somewhere in there. 670, 720, and then 660 and 720. So something like there as well. 720 and 650. So 700 is somewhere along there. It's again over here as well. Moving along, we have a 660 and then 700 points. So we'll do that. So that looks like we have enough data to really connect it here. Now, as you see, this does not run off the page. We actually have a concentric contour here. So this is going to finish up back where we started this. Once again, always keep in mind your labels. So that's our 700-foot contour. But now, way down here in the corner, we see that 540 point. So we have to separate that from these 600 points. So between 660 and 540, 600 will be in there. We know it'll separate it from the rest of these, so we'll just carry that down. Once again, we see it. 600's here, and then that 500 here, so we have to separate them. So we'll just carry that off the edge of the page. Once again, always, it's important to label so that you don't make mistakes like this. 700 foot, so the next one down would be a 600 foot, not a 500 foot. So there we go. That is our contour here. So we have a little hill up here before it starts to come down into this little valley, and then it starts to go back up again, slowly and surely, where it sort of peaks up on this higher hill here before it starts to go back down again. Now remember, it all depends on the scale here. If we had zoomed out this map more and had more data points, what we'd probably see is eventually this turns into a little hill over here, so we'd see something like maybe like that, and then carries around, and then we have that other hill, so we'd probably start carrying around this way then, because it's starting to climb again. So we'd probably get, let me redo that one, something like that. And then we could carry this on more if we had more data, but just so you get an idea of how this would all look if you had a more complete view of the area. But that's unnecessary for the purposes of this lab, but it would certainly help give you a better idea. So next, we have to move on to our contouring, or our profile. So this might seem a little intimidating at first, but I promise it's not as bad as it might seem. Um, so it all really comes down to how you have your contours drawn at the top. So for instance, I had that little island the first way I did this. This time we have a little valley just going along, dipping down before it comes back up. Also in this corner here, depending on how you draw your contours, you might have it a little island above the profile line, or you could even have this come down below the profile. Let's just clean that up a little bit. Just for sake of ease, I'm going to go with it from this way. So we see that we have our profile line from A to A prime. If you want, you can label that on the profile spot down below, A, and then A prime. And then it's really just a matter of carrying this elevation down to the bottom and keeping in mind what that surface has to be doing there. So here we have that 500-foot contour. So if I wanted to, let's go, I'm just going to click there. And then you want to go straight down, and this is that 500 foot, so we'll come to the 500 foot elevation, try and get that line straight, and then, so we're about there. So we'll just draw that point. Next over here, we're at 400 here. I'll just do that really quick. So at the 400-foot elevation, once again coming straight down from where that contour crosses the profile line. So we're about there. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that down here. Then moving over, the next 400 comes straight down. Oh, I already made a mistake. See how I marked that on the 500 instead of the 400? So we'll just go ahead and redo that. So come straight down and hit the 400-foot contour. So it looks pretty straight. So I'll draw it right there. And then you just move along. About there. So come straight down to the 400-foot elevation on the profile. That would mark it off. Then we're back up to the 500. So I'll come straight down to the 500-foot elevation. And then mark it on the profile. And the 600 line crosses. So I'll come straight down to that 600-foot contour, or 600-foot elevation on the profile, and mark it right about there. Now we're at 700. So see where it crosses the profile line, and then just come straight down. You can use a straight edge for this. Do it on the 700 line, right about there. So really you just take a ruler or the edge of a paper, make sure it's perpendicular to this line, and that's easier to do with a clear ruler or something like that. And then just line up a straight line from here and then mark that elevation on the profile below. So once again, 700, come straight down, mark that about there. And that's all the spots that actually cross that profile line, where the contours cross the profile. So to make this complete, once again, you just have to connect the dots and keep in mind what it's doing. So we know it's connecting there and connecting here. So you can tell that this is a little bit of a recession, so we just make a little bit of a U here, because you can see that says 370, and that's pretty close to the line, so that means in between these points it has to dip down below this a little bit. It would be incorrect to just do a straight line from these 2 points, because you know that it dips down in between there. Just like how we know this little hill up here, it's getting higher as you move this way. So it has to go up here. And then following this along, we'll just connect the dots till we get to the top of the hill here. As you see, this goes above that 700-foot line. So we have that here. We'll just make this a little hill. And then here, we know this is going back down again. So we'll just carry it down a little bit below and then off the edge. Make it a little prettier. There we go. And that's the first exercise. If it's handy, you can mark where these lines come down as you're doing it. So using a straight edge, just dot your way down to those points. That's a handy intermediary step, but it's not necessary, especially if you can translate where those contours cross here to down below. So let's go ahead and move on to the second one, exercise 2. So this one obviously looks a little bit more complex just already. It looks like we have a little bit more data points to go off of, and then we also have a stream going in here. So remember those rules I told you about in the last video. One of them is that they have to V through the stream. So once again, just for sake of ease, let's go ahead and start in the top left corner again. And also to help separate this more, we'll just try and stick with working in between this these sections of the stream. So first we have a 380, then a 420. Oh, and once again, this is using a contour interval of 100 feet. So we'll use like 400, 500, 600, etc. So between 380 and 420 has to be a 400-foot line. 360 and 420, so we know there will be a separation there. And then here is a point right at 400, so we know the contour will be on that as well. And over there, it's at 380, and then we have 400 again. So we know that this is going to move up this way. So first, let's start at the edge of the map, and then connect these. Now we have another 400 point here, but remember that we have to V this into the stream. So if you have a straight line connecting those 2 points, that would be incorrect. So what you do is you have to V it up the stream, something like that. And we'll just stop there for now, just for sake of ease, and keep going with these other points in the top left. So we see we have a 540 point. So 500 will be our next contour. 500 falls between 460 and 540, so we'll start there. 500 is in between 540 and 480, so it's got to be somewhere in there as well. And then between 660 and 420, 500 is going to fall in there, as is 600. Oh, look at me, already making mistakes. Remember, labeling is important. So we'll go ahead and label that first one at 400 feet. So now we have a frame of reference to work off of. So this is that 500-foot contour. Make sure you don't confuse these two. So we have basically enough to connect that 500 now. So what we have here is another concentric one, just as a ring. So this area is kind of a hill here. And then we don't really have any other data points for 600, so we can just make a little bubble around that 660 point. Make sure to label 500, then 600. All right. Let's go ahead and work on the bottom portion below that stream. So 440, 400. Okay, so 400, that we'll have to have a contour on that point. 440, 500. So 500 falls there. 400 is less than 440. So 400 is in between 440 and 380. So we know 400 contour will be something like that as well. 460 and 340. So 400 has to be somewhere in there as well. So a little further over. And then 440, 420, 320. So 400 has to be somewhere in here as well. Now we see a bit of a pattern forming here. So let's go ahead and connect these points and do our contour. Make sure you label. Keeps you from getting confused. Alright, so let's continue on and find our 500 contour. So immediately we know it'll be on this point exactly. Between 560 and 460, you'll have 500 in there as well. Between 540 and 440, you'll have 500. And then we're even getting into the 600s, so this looks like we have enough to connect it here. Just clean it up a little bit. Okay. Make sure to label. Alright, and then 600. So, of course, it'll fall right on that 600 point. Then 600 is in between 640 and 560. So we know it's somewhere in there. And we don't have anything else weird going on down here, so we can just connect those as well. All right. Now on the right side, let's continue this 400-foot contour. So 380 and 400, so it'll be there. 380 and 460, 400 has to be in there somewhere. 360 and 440 has to be somewhere in there. 340 and 520, so we'll get two contours in there again. Make sure you pay attention to which one will be the 400. Oh, look, another 400 point, so it has to fall on that as well. Looks like we might have enough to work from here, so let's go ahead and carry this on down. Remember, it's this one, the closer to the 300. Boom. And that'll be this 400-foot contour. So let's go ahead and find our 500. So we already know it's there. 500 is in between 520 and 440. So we'll go ahead and put it there too. Let's go ahead and connect that there. And of course it'll fall right on that 500. Now 500 falls between 440 and 560. So we'll continue it there. And there's not a whole lot of other data, so we can just carry that off the edge again. Carrying this down, 500 falls between 540 and 480, so we know it'll be there. So let's go ahead and connect that. And these all fall in that 400 range. And that falls in the 500 range, so we'll go ahead and just carry that off the edge of the page. Make sure to label. It looks like last but not least, we have our 600-foot contour. So 620, 520, 600 will be in between those. 640, 560, 600 will be in between those. 540, 620, 600 will be in between those. So if you wanted, you could have this as its own little bubble, or what I think makes a little more sense is if we also carry this one off the page and label. All right, and we have our contours. So really, in this instance, the only spot we really have to worry about the V'ing is just in here where that contour actually crosses. Now you could do this a couple of ways. Well, excuse me. It, there, it makes sense. Over here, we see right near the edge, it's at that 380, so there's not really room to V these contours up. Really, realistically, if we had more room, what we'd probably see is a V'ing effect up the stream. So the stream would likely continue like that to some degree. So this 400 contour would probably go something like this around that edge, how it would V like that. But we don't get to see that because of the data we're given on this map. So let me just put it back to how it was. Okay. All right, now we can move on to doing our profile. So A to A prime, once again. So we see that 400-foot contour across that topographic profile line here. So just carry that straight down to that 400-foot elevation in the profile area. Once again, it's helpful to use a straight edge here. And we're cutting across. We have another 400 here. So carry that straight down to the 400-foot elevation on the profile. Then we have 500 here. So take that down to the straight down to the 500-foot elevation. Then we have 600. there. So carry that straight down to the 600-foot elevation. So this is only a few points we have here. So we kind of have to do a little bit of inference here. In between these 2 points is where that stream is. So you can see we have a stream there, stream there. So in between here, there might be a little bit of a hump going upwards. So let's go ahead and mark that in. So it'd be about there. It's obviously not enough to reach up to a full 100-foot higher elevation, but it's important to keep in mind. And then we have the actual streams. So let's see, that should be about there. So we'd see it dip down here. Oh, I'm sorry. This actually wouldn't be above that 400-foot elevation. It should still be underneath there. We're still working in between. And this one is about here. So we'll just dip these down some before we come back up. Just going to clean it up a little bit. All right, and then go ahead and connect it. Now on this left side, we see that 400 foot here, and we see that it goes up the hill to the left, so but not quite up to the 500. So we'll just carry this up to the edge of our profile here without getting all the way up to that 500 foot elevation. Then on the right, we can just connect all of these. And once again, we have a hill here. It doesn't quite go up another 100 feet, but we do know it's above that 600 foot elevation, 640, 620. So we want to go a little above this, and we can just take that off the edge here. And there you go. And that is our second exercise. So you can reference this video in your downtime as you work through the other exercises. Once again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me or come in during my office hours, which are Monday from 3 to 4 p.m. And if you email me ahead, we can go ahead and meet in the lab, or my office is in 210, which is the floor above our lab room. Best of luck. I hope this went well for you. Feel free to email me with any questions, and I hope it went well. Thank you.